Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of interesting stories that we have to bring you this morning. So first of all, we have the start of a trial date in one of Trump's many trials, and we have a rapidly filling out calendar of trial and political, and so it's all pretty wild. We'll break that down for you. We've also got some new polls revealing just how Americans actually feel about both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, so we'll bring you those numbers. New dire economic predictions and some new dire economic numbers. We've also got a major hurricane that is set to hit the state of Florida. We'll bring you updates on that. And a little bit of a tiff, I guess, between Vivek Ramaswamy and Eminem. He famously, as his character Davek, liked to rap Eminem. He did it at the Iowa State Fair. Eminem is now responding, so we've got all of that for you. But before we get into any of that, thank you so much to everybody who's been signing up to be premium subscribers. We revealed yesterday we are in the works to get a focus group going. That is thanks to your support and you guys back in this channel.
Yes, that's right. We are actively working, scheduling, working on all the details right now. Everybody who's signing up who took advantage of the debate special continues to sign up now. You guys are just helping us out so much. These two things do cost a lot of money. There's a lot of travel involved. We're working with various different firms, etc. And we want to try and bring you the best possible coverage, and the networks all have, big pharma advertisers and all those other people. We only have you. So breakingpoints.com, if you are able to sign up, it really does help us a lot. But with that, let's get to the trial.
Yes, indeed. So let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. We have a trial date set now in the federal case for Donald Trump, where he is charged with plotting to overturn the election. This is one of the Jack Smith cases. This is the one directly related to the fake electors plot and January 6th and all of that stuff. So a judge on Monday set a March 4th, 2024 trial date for Donald Trump in that case, rejecting, they say, a defense request to push the case back years. It was not quite as expedited as special counsel Jack Smith wanted. He wanted that date to be in January, but it was, much closer to his date than what the defense was pushing for. They wanted to push this all the way out, I think, until 2026. Now, there's something very noteworthy about March 4th, and that is that it is right next to Super Tuesday. So let's put this next piece up on the screen. We've compiled a graphic of all of the rapidly filling dates, the very full calendar that Donald Trump is going to be facing here with what we know of his trial dates, plus the key points in the election. So September 6th, he's arraigned in Georgia. September 27th, there's the second GOP debate. We'll see if he participates. October 2nd, we've got the trial in the Trump org civil fraud suit. Later that month, we've got the first trial in the Georgia case. Now, that is the trial of Kenneth Chesebro, but it is expected that Trump may be involved, may be called as a witness. On January 15th, we've got the Iowa Republican caucuses, and we also have the start of the trial in the E. Jean Carroll civil defamation suit. Let's go ahead and put the next one up on the screen because we are far from done. January 29th, the trial in the pyramid scheme class action suit. This is some Trump org stuff that I genuinely didn't even know was going on, but apparently it is, and it starts on January 29th. On February 6th, we have the Nevada Republican primary. On February 27th, we've got the Michigan Republican primary. And then on March 4th, the trial starts in the federal January 6th case. The very next day is the Super Tuesday primaries. Then we go on. Later in March, we've got the trial in the New York State criminal hush money case. That's the Stormy Daniels one. And last graphic that we have, and of course, this is not complete because we don't know all of the trial dates and when they start yet. May 14th, we've got pretrial hearing in the classified documents case, and May 20th, the trial in the classified documents case. So this is the campaign schedule, guys. It's going to be a lot less about debates and policy and all of the things that we would aspirationally want our democracy to be about, and much more about the unfoldings and the doings and workings of these trials, which are going to occupy a lot of the former president's time as we head into the heat of 2024.
Yeah, and I think that the judge made a mistake here putting it in March. Obviously, the Trump people are being ridiculous. I even think that the Jack Smith trial date, proposed date, is too late. I mean, you can't be having these things around actual election season. It needs to try and be wrapped up before. And so it's August 29th right now. I mean, I don't see any reason why it can't happen sometime in 2023. It's, the lawyers are like, oh, it takes, listen, I understand that. But from an actual small d Democratic perspective, having the trial date set the day before, where he will be down there ahead of Super Tuesday when dozens of states head to the polls in the primary, is insane. And then also to have it, the January trial, the civil, I mean, look, at least that one is civil, but to have that one on the same day Tuesday as Iowa. Weren't we also talking about the other case that was happening that we saw where some of the proposed dates are in May of 2024, post Super Tuesday? To have all of these things happen, the Trump team, of course, is going to use this opportunity to say, oh, it should all happen after the election. I think that's ridiculous. But I think the American people deserve to actually have some sort of finality, and even the Republican voter, to have some sort of like final say on the most consequential cases like these, far, far ahead before they go ahead and head to the polls. And also, obviously, Krystal, as you and I know, this is only going to help Trump in a primary situation. I will save my speculation for what on the general electorate I've long ago given up on any idea of what will happen when everybody actually does go to the polls. On the GOP primary, we have ample evidence enough to show us that this is the best thing that could ever happen to him for winning the nomination.
Yeah, I mean, it all does beg the question, why did it take so long for these charges to drop? I mean, that's really, I don't really blame Jack Smith because he wasn't appointed special counsel. He wasn't handed this until relatively recently. And so to conduct an investigation and do it in a like proper and thorough manner, that timeline makes sense to me. Even the documents case, like that timeline also makes sense to me because they were trying to go back and forth with Trump, and they were genuinely, seems like they were trying to do everything they could before taking the more aggressive stance of the FBI raid and then ultimately being sort of like having their hand forced and filing charges. But I don't know why Fulton County took so long.
It's ridiculous.
I don't know why Merrick Garland took so damn long to appoint Jack Smith as special counsel. I mean, literally, this should have been done on like day one of the administration. Like, we knew what unfolded on January 6th. We knew there were potential crimes there. So what were you all waiting around for? And that's what, to me, is very frustrating. I mean, listen, the Trump people were always going to say this is political, no matter what the facts are, no matter what the timeline was, et cetera. If they had appointed a special counsel on day one of the Biden administration, they would have said that was clearly political, you know, that it happened right out of the gates. But I care much more about the American people being able to evaluate all of these charges and his potential guilt or innocence and have this play out before election season really kicks off. And I think by them dawdling and dragging their feet for whatever reason, I think they have really, you know, just made the election very difficult, really undermined democracy in a certain sense, because now no one's going to be talking about, hey, what's your tax plan? Hey, what's your foreign policy plan? Hey, you know, what are we going to do in terms of getting people a better wage? None of that is really going to be the center of this campaign. And that's really kind of it's a huge loss and it's a huge disaster.
It's a massive loss and it's a huge disservice by Merrick Garland and the Biden Department of Justice. If you're going to do it, then do it. You know, you guys could have done it literally on day one. You could have come into office and be like, I'm appointing a special counsel on January 6th. They decided not to go there. As you said, I'll back it up on the documents case because that was a timeline that actually did take months. They charged relatively quickly, actually, considering all the things that happened. But both on Fulton County and on this, I mean, it's very difficult not to read it as an actual attempt to influence the election.
I mean, what do you think why do you think they actually waited? Because my theory is effectively like, maybe they deluded themselves into thinking that Trump would just go away and they wouldn't have to do the uncomfortable thing of charging the former president.
My theory is that they didn't know where they stood on the ground of popular opinion on Stop the Steal. They probably had the opinion that January 6th and all that, they're like, well, maybe the American people don't care as much, Stop the Steal, etc. Then the midterms happen and like, oh, actually they do care a lot. Why don't we go ahead and, you know, hammer this thing home? Not a bad thing in order to remind the American people about what happened on January 6th in the run-up to the election. I genuinely believe it is that political in terms of its base instinct. If you were to think about the way that this all happened too, with the January 6th case, they made the decision, you know, previously not to go ahead with these charges. They turned it over as a matter of course to Jack Smith under the fold of the documents case, not as one of his main mandates. But Jack Smith then goes ahead and decides to prosecute. So, I mean, that's a very difficult one in order to get around. They decided not to prosecute, then he decides to prosecute. They can't do anything because he's got special prosecutor status. But, I mean, again, to the political and the actual electoral aspects. So there's a funny clip here from CNN where they air what the dream of the liberal, like the capital L liberal MSNBC, CNN viewer is like, oh, this is obviously going to take him out. But here they air a very countervailing opinion, which I do think has a lot of truth behind it. Let's take a listen.
I know that Democrats look at this race and think, well, we'll probably do pretty well against Donald Trump. But there's a real reality here of being careful what you wish for. That's exactly what Democrats thought in 2016. They thought there was no way that Donald Trump could beat Hillary Clinton, and he did, and we saw what the results were from that. I'd tell Democrats, be really careful of what you wish for on this.
You're rhetorical. No, that's absolutely. I mean, he's right. There's a good chance that Donald Trump can win.
Yeah, there's a good chance that Donald Trump can win. Remember what Harry Enton said on their own network, Krystal? He said, he's like, look, he's doing better in his polls against Biden than he did against Hillary, and he's doing better against polls in Biden than he did against Biden in 2020. I mean, things, as much as people want him to be gone, there is no evidence at all that this current case or any of that against him has had a major impact. Now, look, he hasn't gone to trial, but at this point, I mean, how many Americans have seen the mugshot? Like, how many Americans are vaguely aware that Trump is indicted and or being prosecuted for something? Some people say that they won't vote for him. We'll see. I mean, it's one of those. But poll after poll after poll after poll shows that he has strength. Now, look, they all could be totally wrong. We could have a same miss that we had in 2022, where we vastly underestimated the revulsion at Stop the Steal. I don't want to rule that out whatsoever. But does he have a chance? Absolutely has a chance. And they think this is the silver bullet, when I think it actually gets us even much closer to a precipice of some sort of disaster in 2024.
If you are the nominee of one of the two major parties, you have a chance.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, no matter how many indictments, no matter how guilty you are of how many crimes, you've got a chance. And I don't think anyone should delude themselves about that. Now, I do think that all of the weight of these charges and the prospect of jail time and just the constant reminder of the mess and the chaos that was President Donald Trump, I do think that that weighs on the general electorate. But if you look at the polls right now, it is literally tied. It's literally tied. And I think Democrats should do a lot of soul searching about how they could possibly, how their guy, who's the incumbent president, could possibly be tied with this guy who, in my opinion, is a criminal, who is thoroughly corrupt. We're about to get to the fact that the American people also think that he is thoroughly corrupt. How are you tied with this dude? And don't tell me it's misinformation, or don't tell me it's whatever cope that they love to roll out, or Americans just don't realize how good the economy actually is, etc. No, you have failed if you are in a jump ball with this dude that Americans were very happy to get rid of, and who has a 31% approval rating, and who, as we showed you yesterday, about 60% of the country on every one of these charges thinks that he's guilty. And you're tied with him? I mean, that's astonishing. And if you think about it also in terms of all their, they really want to unite this anti-Trump coalition. Their whole message isn't about, hey, we're going to do anything for you. It's just about stopping Trump. Well, if your core commitment really is stopping Trump, you need to look in the mirror about your commitment to propping up Joe Biden, who clearly is an incredibly weak candidate going into 2024. If you really wanted to beat Donald Trump, you would actually have a competitive Democratic primary so that voters had an opportunity to back a candidate that they aren't afraid is going to not make it through the next term and leave us with Kamala Harris as president. If you actually wanted to defeat Donald Trump, that's what you would do, so that people had an opportunity to participate in democracy and be able to evaluate the candidates and come up with the strongest choice to defeat this guy. But they have no interest in doing that, because ultimately they're more concerned with keeping their grip on power within the Democratic establishment than they really are committed to beating Donald Trump.
Yeah, and for all of the talk of corruption, it's like if you were to go ask a Republican voter, they'd be like, all right, well, Biden's corrupt. And you're like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of true. And it's like, well, how come nobody talks about, Hunter Biden or any of that? This isn't whataboutism. I'm just demonstrating that when you don't allow like an actual free discussion of this, particularly in the media or the Democratic primary, to have a Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. actually call out Biden or any of this on the stage, have him account for it, then Democratic primary voters and others could say, well, we had a reasonably fair process where these things were aired. But when you push it down to silence, and then you also see the other candidate who's being actively prosecuted, it's like, well, it's very difficult in order to draw this different conclusion. And it comes back to the fact that for a lot of people, and we talked about this, we have a segment dropping over the weekend, I think people will enjoy it, about tribalism and about how negative partisanship is at all-time high levels. That's exactly how you get to this situation. You have no ability in order to positively win over. The slice of the electorate that can be positively win over is smaller and smaller, and they feel equal revulsion, it seems, with a lot of these candidates, and are much more voting in terms of choosing the lesser of two evils, which is, as we said, that's a terrible way in order to run your democracy. One thing, though, that we wanted to flag for people, and I've said this before, let's put this up there, please, on the screen. This is actually a write-up of about a Reuters Ipsos poll, which shows that The majority of Americans, a supermajority actually, nearly 60% of Americans say they, quote, have at least a fair amount of trust in juries. And why that matters is this is something I flagged previously when we're talking about Trump. I mean, look, we're anti-institutionalists here, me in particular, whenever it comes to some of, whatever it comes to like discussion around Trump. That said, whenever a large segment of this country still has kind of like a normie belief in the justice system. They're like, oh, these institutions, they're not corrupt. They're following the rule of law. He got a mugshot, he got arrested. There's got to be, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think you said that last time. So if they do have a jury ostensibly of peers convict Trump here in Washington, D.C. or others, there could be some trust in that system by more independent voters because they think that there's no way that they would have voted to convict him if there wasn't some sort of fair conclusion. That's my one flag, too, for people is like, for some independent-minded voters, the fact that he faces these legal troubles, and if he is convicted, that could, I wouldn't say it's disqualifying entirely, but it could marginally impact the amount of people who vote for him, and in a close election, that could matter a lot when it comes to the polls.
So with regards to jurors, most Americans, especially Americans actually who have served on juries before, have faith in, you know, jury of their peers. I think the fact that this is not a bunch of elites, it's ordinary citizens who sign up for this, well, don't sign up, or are selected for this civic duty and show up and do their part, like that has kept this an institution that has a relatively high amount of faith. So about 60% of Americans say they have at least some amount of trust in juries, according to a recent survey. But when you ask specifically about Trump's trials, a majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, said they did not think the courts would be able to seat impartial jurors. So when it comes to Trump specifically, and I mean, it sort of makes sense, Saagar, because everyone's feelings about this man are so hardened. Like, it would be kind of impossible to get, I don't know, a jury that's like been living under a rock for the past 8 years and hasn't formed some sort of an opinion about Donald Trump and whether he's a hero or whether he's a criminal. So I do think it'll be tough for them to go through this jury process and come up with people who really truly have an open mind in terms of hearing the evidence and deciding where they stand. Obviously, the Trump team has been trying to make a lot of hay about, you know, D.C., which is a jurisdiction that votes overwhelmingly Democratic. It's actually the most Democratic voting jurisdiction in the entire country. So they've been trying to make a lot of hay about that and to plant the seed in people's minds that you can't possibly get a jury that is going to be fair and impartial in this city. So, you know, that's going to be kind of a continuing, ongoing conversation. But just to sum all of this up, to be totally clear about how I feel about this, which I think people know, I think you can hold two thoughts in your mind, which is that the charges are appropriate, which is what I believe. And I do think that he, you know, committed these crimes. He deserves to have his day in court and present all of his evidence, et cetera. You look at the documents trial, it's pretty hard for me to see what their defense is. You know, I do think the charges on January 6th in Fulton County, et cetera, are, you know, pretty clear and also appropriate. You can believe that and also think that, yeah, there's a lot of politics involved here. And I think the timing of it is the perfect case in point. Why did they wait to this point? What was the calculation that led to all of these things unfolding right in the midst of a campaign season instead of what would have been a real service to the American public if you were going to file charges, do it as soon as possible so that people have an opportunity to evaluate all of this on its own merits before we're in a campaign season. So for my part, that's the way I feel about all this.
Yeah, and I think, no, that's very reasonable. I think for many people look at it. But unfortunately, I think a lot of this is going to get lost in the partisan muck and on cable news.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.